What does it take to lead with confidence in this new AI era, especially as it's changing the rules of the game and the game itself? So, welcome to Professional Insights brought to you by the National Referral Network. We've got a great conversation this morning. Today's guest, Stan Freck, as has been on the forefront of a lot of changing technologies over the last decades. He's coached senior leaders in multi-billion dollar companies across 50 countries, spent years with Microsoft, has a tremendous amount of knowledge. And I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of the knowledge in this conversation, but he brings a unique ability for executive coaching, the global tech leadership. And we're going to talk about some of these leadership roles with AI. But before we get going, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We'll make sure to get to them, whether myself or Stan or somebody will facilitate those questions. So without any further ado, let's jump into this. Morning, Stan.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Doing fantastic. It's another
Great.
Tuesday morning. I love these. Stan, one of the things, I think you and I talked about this, one of the things I enjoy about these conversations the most is I've been in this business a long time on the financial services side, and there's a lot that I have no clue on, right? And with everything changing so rapidly, I learn so much from these interviews, which is, I wish I could do these all the time, but there is some prep to that. So with all that said, let's jump into it. And kind of, you and I spoke about this. So kind of let's start at kind of a bigger picture standpoint. In what ways do you see the responsibilities of your clients or the C-suites that are evolving in response to this AI changing strategic kind of business drivers and KPIs and how they operate their businesses?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sort of hinge on the word evolving because there is definitely an evolution there's a revolution going on in technology right now. I'm not convinced that leadership responsibilities are going to evolve as much as they're going to be hyper emphasized, a few of them. And I'll talk about what I mean by that. But AI is definitely going to reshape business on a very fundamental level in almost every aspect in every business. So if I walk sort of through the C-suite, the things I think about are, CEOs are going to have to be focused on what does AI-driven innovation mean for their company, right? Make sure their company's using it strategically, but also thinking about the ethical considerations, right? Because there are some real serious rough edges in terms of how AI presents and what it brings forward in any business. And the other thing I would say, especially for the CEO, would be AI literacy is going to be essential. I think back to 1994, I was at a company that was essentially in doing computer system development. We were doing consulting work. We were doing a whole bunch of, high-end sort of intellectual activity. And yet we were all sharing pools of computers. Right. And somebody asked the CEO in an open, all hands forum, hey, when are we going to have a computer for everybody in the company, right? When are we going to get on the train here? Because it was moving, right? 94, if you remember back, IBM PC was out, Mac Power Macs were the rage in a lot of places. So it was happening. It was, had already started to move pretty quickly. And his response, and this is who you don't want to be, was, well, there are dictaphones in the storage rooms. That's what admins are for. And at that point, you could see half the room mentally leave the company. And the other half sort of crack their heads and go, gosh, what does this mean for the future? Because they were maybe in a comfort zone. But literally, it's a sea change that you can't miss. Because if you do, you won't be in existence any longer. CFOs, it's going to change risk assessment, investment strategy. You name it. And so being agile and understanding that there's going to be massive change in your organization, massive change for your people, massive change for the processes that you run, and making sure you enable that and actually act in a way that you're the avatar of it, right? You're sort of going to be looked at by your teams. And CTOs, CIOs, my gosh, if they haven't already become key members of the C-suite, they are going to be central figures in corporate strategy, in making sure the infrastructure is in place to do this across the organization. The data governance policies are in place, and processes in place. Security is top notch, and they're going to have to be tightly integrated with the rest of the C-suite to make sure that whatever the AI initiatives are tightly aligned with business goals and also well integrated, well coordinated. Otherwise, it's going to be the land of 1,000 flowers, and they aren't necessarily going to play well together. So
now, Stan, you work with a certain level of company. Now, a lot of viewers that may be watching this are that kind of, we'll call them that Main Street business owner, that although they are the CEO, they're still kind of that technician that works in the business. And so how is this going to affect them? And even that mid-level business, right? I mean, they're making 6, 7, 10 million in revenue. But how is it going to affect them? I mean, because this stuff is moving rapidly.
It is, and that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, right? That at the end of the day, I can't remember who I was watching. It might have been Mark Andreessen. Somebody said basically there's going to be in the not too distant future somebody who can build $1 billion business with one person in their office, not leaving the room. And that's because of the tools and the AI capabilities that are going to be there. So I actually think as a small business, even a medium business, moving quickly, figuring out how to apply this both to your business, but also to your day-to-day activities, right? One of the quickest ways to learn this stuff is to think about, okay, what do I do every day? Literally, what's my job? And how can I use these tools to enable that? And then you're actually getting your hands dirty a little bit. You're figuring out, oh, I use this to manage my tasks. Here's how I would do that, or how I would manage my email. There's tons of tools out there. And that's one of the challenges right now. Huge proliferation of AI-driven tools. So how do you pick and choose between those things? So you have to just pick a few things and give it a shot. But for small and medium businesses, I think this is a huge opportunity to play at a different level than you've been able to play before. Because to some degree, whoever first mover advantage here is going to be pretty important, and that's going to be a very narrow window to some degree, right? Things are moving very quickly,
very rapidly. And you mentioned this in the first question about AI is really making real-time decisions more possible. I mean, so rapidly at so many levels, and a lot of business owners aren't getting the data. I mean, today, aren't getting the data from their financial teams, be it a CPA or their tax strategist. And so I know that's a little bit off into the weeds, but just on a pure KPI and running a business, how do you help leaders balance that data-driven insight with that human intuition and judgment as we move into this AI-driven world?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's actually more important, right? Because the truth of AI, at least current incarnation, and for some time to come, is two things are true. When you ask an AI large language model a question, as opposed to a search engine, which gave you a list of possible things, you get an answer.
Right.
And that answer is stated very confidently, right? And to some degree, my mother taught me this when I was like a little kid, which is, hey, if you show up in the room and you have a presence and you state your position confidently, people will give you some credibility, right? And so you have to be super critical and work a human into the loop to evaluate how these responses that you're getting and put it in context of the broader business context that you have. There will be automated decision making, but I think we got to be super careful about the guardrails, about what's the process to manage those things, and put sort of a human in the loop on that. I kind of went off a tangent there. I apologize, but to me, that's a pretty important consideration.
Well, but Stan, it goes to kind of the next question. Really, is that not just with what you're talking about, but across the board at a very high level, there is increased scrutiny on AI's ethical implications. I mean, I believe the CEO of OpenAI was just in front of Congress talking about this. And he's been there a couple times now. It's not just the first time. So how should leaders think about bias, transparency, responsibility in AI systems, especially with decision-making when it becomes that automated? When you have, okay, you just went off into the weeds, so let's go a little bit farther. when you have this movement towards agentic, which is still even though it's a year old, but when you have AI doing every aspect of your business, how do you manage that?
So that sentence, I think, is a critical sentence.
Okay.
I would never personally have AI do every facet of my business.
Fair.
Right. You get into, there's a human in the loop for a reason. Right. And you want to make sure that you're using AI as an enabler, as the term co-pilot was chosen very, very specifically, because the idea was not to replace the pilot. In some cases, the idea is to replace the pilot. I'm not going to claim that everyone's on the same page.
Right.
But I think the healthier idea is not to replace the pilot. It's to give the pilot a new set of tools, and then that gives the pilot the ability to step up where their value add is, to say, okay, I know I need to insert myself in these locations because this is just an enabling tool, which unconstrained will go do what it's designed to do, and do it efficiently, and do it effectively, and do it repeatedly, and do it consistently, and all those LY terms that you are looking for in a business process, which then, however, can lead to some pretty unintended consequences if you're making decisions on loan financing, and it's not necessarily, it's got a set of rules, and it's got a set of guidelines, and it's got a way in which it's supposed to assume and decide things. There are times, and we've all run into these, where, this isn't the rational outcome. Pick up the phone, I can talk to somebody, and if I get to the right person, I can get a more rational reaction from the system. And I think that's going to necessarily be even more important than it has been. So I would focus on three things in this ethical space that you're talking about. One is understand that it's sort of the old term, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
If the data that it's being trained on is biased, the outcomes it will produce will be biased, and in fact, often exacerbated, right? Accentuated sometimes. And so that's really important for every company to make sure that they're using the technology and having the underpinnings of the data that it uses, really be buttoned up, right? That if you go off to the races and you're using, excuse my language, crap data, you're going to get crap results. They'll look really authoritative. They'll come across really confidently, but they will reflect exactly what they were trained on. The second thing is transparency.
Okay.
Don't treat it like a black box. And the third thing is responsibility. Using AI doesn't eliminate your accountability. So who's responsible for these decisions that are driven by AI? Not AI. It's got to be some person. What are the ethical guidelines for deploying this stuff within your organization? Work on that as a team or as an individual if you've got a small business, and invest in upskilling so that your employees can interpret the recommendations effectively.
It's interesting that the crap in, crap out stand has been in business forever. And so look, if you're not giving your bookkeeper data, you get crap data, you're going to get crap information back, and KPIs are going to be messed up. So it's interesting that despite the newer technology in the AI, is that we're still talking about core fundamentals of running a business: crap in, crap out.
Well, it's the same thing about scaling a business, right? If you haven't got your processes, your business process, to a point where they're actually effective and they're efficient and they make sense, scaling them is just going to scale something really bad.
Right.
I'll give you an example. I have a friend, and I won't name the company. Happens to be a Silicon Slopes, Utah Valley company, or was no longer in business. But he showed up, and they were saying, "Hey, we're huge sales. We've got so many units going out of this big seller. We're going to ramp that up and amplify that." And he was the CFO, and newly minted CFO. He lasted all of 2 weeks, I believe, before he said, "I'm out of here," because the conversation was, "So what are you selling those for?" And they gave a number, $2.56. He goes, "Well, I've looked at it, and we're buying them for $3.47. So every unit you sell makes us go further out of business." And so, it's just, you got to be careful, right? What you're going to automate and what you're going to amplify, because AI will do this it will go 100x, 1000x, 10,000x compared to automation in the previous generation of technology, right? Which is, a little slower moving, right? You really need to be buttoned up and make sure that you're doing it on a basis of really, really solid, clean, unbiased data, and you're automating processes that have the outcomes that you want to have for your customers, for your business.
Now, you mentioned a couple things in the previous answers here. You mentioned Copilot and some systems and processes. And obviously with AI, there's this dichotomy between it's not going to replace all the jobs, but it's going to replace all the jobs, right? If it's going to enhance those individuals that use it, and then, right, there's all kinds of conversations. But when you talk about Copilot and systems and processes, what role really does a C-suite leaders play in reframing that narrative around AI as a force for empowerment rather than you're going to be replaced by AI?
Yeah, it's actually, I use it maybe too often, but it's sort of my favorite quote of the day about this technology, which is that AI is not going to take your job. Somebody that knows how to use it well is going to take your job. And so I think that's just a reality, to some degree, no matter what your role is, right? That somebody who knows how to use AI, who's a competing, CEO of a competing company, is going to take your job as CEO. You're going to put you out of business, and you're going to compete within the company, same kind of things, right? And so more and more, that AI fluency will become table stakes. And so if I'm an exec, and I still think of myself that way, I think there's a couple key things. One, AI fluency and strategic vision. How do you bring those two things together? Am I able to at least be competent and capable? This can't be something you outsource or insource to your CIO. It can't be something you grab a special committee and you're in charge of AI. It really needs to be, go through the entire organization and be used wherever appropriate, in appropriate ways. So second thing is human-centric leadership, right? It's going to be automating tasks, but you've got to prioritize people. You've got to invest in upskilling, foster a collaborative environment, and like you said, make sure it's empowering rather than alienating the workforce, your employees. Third thing, I've mentioned it a couple times, ethical and responsible governance. If you don't put that in place up front, it will get out away from you, and it's really hard to reel back in. The fourth one is agility. And you're going to notice a lot of these things that I'm saying aren't new, really.
And that's what I was noticing, Stan. I mean, like,
new in the context of AI, right? So agility and decision-making, innovative problem solving, resilience in sort of uncertainty, because there's going to be this sort of, wait a minute, is this reliable? Is this not reliable? I need to vet that and get it out. And then you really, as any leader needs to be showing thought leadership and shape the narrative. What is the conversation we're going to have as a company? How am I going to demonstrate and show the leadership in this AI space, right? What am I going to be an exemplar of? How am I going to use it, right? Am I going to insist everybody else uses it and I sit back and do things the way I've always done it? Or am I going to actually start to show that, hey, this is not something to be terrified of. It is something to engage with, because if you just ignore it and pretend it won't be there, it'll go right past you.
And these are things that you and I've talked about before. And I believe this is kind of the stuff that's going to define this new era of leadership. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, very much. I talk often about this shift sort of I worked for 3 different CEOs at Microsoft, right? Bill Gates in his early days was very hard-driven, type A. His favorite statement to people was to say, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Not really, not PC in today's age, that's for sure.
No.
I actually had to think about, as I went into my first meeting with him and the exec team, what would I say if he said that to me? And I had an answer. I don't know if it would have flown, because he never actually said it directly to me, but I was pretty close once. And then Ballmer came in, and Ballmer was much more of a sales guy, much more sort of personal, but he was also bluster and big guy and big personality and big persona, and had to figure out how to moderate that. And then Satya Nadella came along. He's a very different creature, right? He's a very different animal, and he's very focused on being an empathetic leader. And I think that's going to be critical in these times. It's going to be amplified, the need to be empathetic. And by empathy, what I mean is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Right.
So I think most business leaders are very used to thinking, if they're a customer-centric organization, okay, what's my, how do I think like my customer? How do I put myself in their shoes? How do I, understand it from their perspective? It's interesting that many have not gotten the memo that hey, you need to do that for your people too, right? Internally, put yourself in their shoes. How is this going to affect them? How is this going to feel to them? The best ones have both of these things. But what I would say in any time of uncertainty, but particularly with AI, lead with curiosity, not fear, right? You need to be asking the right questions and not be threatened, not have your ego threatened by the fact that you need to ask those questions. In fact, asking those questions in open forum with your team shows that it's okay to some degree.
Stan, but I mean, the interesting thing about all of this, Stan, is that, and I understand there's the component of the AI, but the thing that I keep hearing from you are things that business leaders need to have done from like a long time, despite AI. They need to lead with curiosity. They need to involve their team. They need to, like, a lot of these things are just core business principles that a lot of business owners, CEOs don't implement to begin with.
Yeah, it's not that there's nothing new under the sun. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't have a crystal ball. AI will change things in ways that I could not possibly tell you right now or
Right.
predict. But I do know two things. One, to some degree, it's another tool in the toolbox.
Right.
Right. And you needed to figure out how to use the tools in the toolbox before, and they were disruptive before. There was a time where, business was done, on clay tablets with a stencil, with a stylus, and people did business. And you still needed to manage your people, and you still needed to get pyramids built or whatever you were doing. And I just mixed the Egyptians and the cuneiform. I get it, but the point is absolutely on point. What you just said. It's not that the skills are different. It's that the pace at which change is happening is accelerating madly.
Oh, yes.
And so they become that much more important. At least that's my tenet, my belief.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that there won't be something new come out of this whole movement, because within, I don't know, people have different time frames that they'll state, but 2 to 10 years, we'll have AGI, we'll have general intelligence, and we'll see. All sorts of possible things could spin out of that. But I would be shocked if the core sort of leadership requirements of embracing change with an open mind, figure out how to manage disruption, not be overwhelmed by it, invest in understanding these new things from an ethical and a societal standpoint, not just for your business. Build a culture where change is a given, and this is seen as an enabler, not a replacement. Stay agile, ask the right questions, prioritize transparency. All those things just don't go away as long as people are in the loop, right? I mean, yes, work will change. We went at some point from a 7-day work week to a 5-day work week to who knows, right? Maybe we'll have a 2-day work week or a 1-day. I don't know. I have no idea, but I do know that I'd be shocked if there's a scenario in which people aren't running those companies.
Yeah, and I agree, Stan. I don't, and I heard I follow a lady that does a lot of content on AI, and she really presents it from both sides of the fence, meaning the advances and also the ethical concerns and just concerns in general. And one of the things that she mentioned the other day is that, and this is just her prediction, her opinion, but as things start to advance even more rapidly, the idea of this human interaction, live meetings, live seminars that you're needing to sit down and talk to somebody will become a more high-priced environment because of this AI is going to drive so much innovation. So it'll be interesting because
meaning that it'll be more highly valued.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I couldn't agree more.
Right. Yeah, because now we can do this interview almost 100% AI now. Almost.
We could have actually set up two AI bots and had them interview each other. I've seen it,
Yes.
demoed before, and it's amazingly lifelike.
Yes.
Like lifelike, not life. And so it's interesting. I saw something the other day. I think this is going to manifest in every facet of life. Entertainment, take that for example. There are people doubling down on live sports because their contention is, and I get where they're coming from, you can't have agentic robotic interactions on a playing field that have the same human drama, that have the same struggle to some degree, right? It's interesting from a mechanical and a technical standpoint possibly, but it's not what people watch sports for. It's not what people watch drama on. If you're not a sports person, fine, but there's people will watch other human interactions for the humanity of it. And that's something that we may have incredible AGI and systems that interact in a almost indistinguishably human way in terms of interaction, but I don't believe that they're going to end up being human. So that's going to be something that's going to be, as you say, highly prized and highly valued.
It'll be interesting. Stan, I want to be cognizant of your time. I certainly appreciate it. And you've given so many little nuggets here. And so as we wrap this thing up, if you could give one piece of advice to today's C-suite leaders standing obviously at the edge of this very, very rapidly changing AI transformation, what would it be?
Don't be the one with the dictaphone. Be the one that's grabbing this new tiger by the tail and figuring out what to do about it for yourself, or somebody will figure it out for you, right?
Somebody will always figure it out for you.
You don't eat your lunch, somebody will eat your lunch for you.
Yes. Don't be the person with the dictaphone. I love that one. I love that. Stan, thank you. I appreciate it. I know we could have gone on and on, but like I said, I want to be cognizant of your time. Thank you so much. We'll have you back on. I'm sure this is going to be changing rapidly. Love to get your opinion and feedback on how things are changing. But if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. We'll get them to Stan. We'll answer them the best we can. And then if you need help, I'll leave Stan's website below. Reach out to him. Great resource. And Stan, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Mike, thank you. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing how this all plays out.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
All right. Take care.